Hello, welcome to our Lunch and Learn on building an environmentally sustainable set as part of our Ethical Set series. I'm Megan Ross, Seed&Spark's Head of Creator Success. Before we begin, we'd first like to acknowledge the land we are all on is occupied territory. Please check the YouTube live comments feed for a link to a First Nations COVID relief fund and an amazing app that will tell you exactly whose land you are currently watching from, or in the video description if you're watching this as a VOD. I am coming to you from the land originally belonging to Jamanos, Tonkawa, Coahuiltecan, and Comanche. And if you're not familiar with Seed&Spark, we are a platform built to support creators by providing tools for wherever you are in your journey, from crowdfunding and education to impact distribution. This event is made possible by the support of WeTransfer. Having made its name in the game of quick and simple file sharing, WeTransfer has grown into an end-to-end suite of digital solutions with more than 70 million monthly active users in 190 countries. WeTransfer's set of tools are specifically designed to enable creative professionals to inspire, conceive, share, and deliver their work. So for those who RSVP'd on Eventbrite, we will be sending you a 50% discount link from WeTransfer. And if you didn't RSVP but are watching now, DM us with your email. We'll get you added to the follow-up email. And I'd like to thank our partners as well today. We have a few wonderful event partners to thank, and Danny will share their links in the chat. In the Cut LA produces multiple online events per month, carefully curated to bring value to budding Black creatives and other marginalized communities. They've created a space where you can learn from real industry professionals and receive actionable, thoughtful advice on how to advance your career. Film Shop is a nonprofit collective of independent filmmakers committed to developing new work through peer support and collaboration. Chapters in Brooklyn, Manhattan, Los Angeles, and New Orleans meet weekly to workshop projects, offer constructive critique, and incubate new ideas. The School of Film and TV at Loyola Marymount University is one of the top 10 film schools in the country. Located in LA, the heart of the media and entertainment industry, SFTV is known for its robust hands-on training, exceptional liberal arts education, and highly engaged community. And finally, the Gotham provides various levels of membership to creators in the film and media industry, filmmakers, screenwriters, podcasters, and more, with the goal of providing tangible connections, learnings, and skills to apply to their projects and careers. Done with announcements, and now I'll introduce our amazing guest for today's event. Stephanie Dawson is a producer, production manager, and line producer who has worked in many aspects of production across scripted and unscripted, long form and short form media. Her credits include Down with the King, which premiered in Cannes in 2021, Derek Delgadio's In and of Itself, which that blew my mind when I watched that last year, which is now streaming on Hulu, and the independent feature film Maya and Her Lover, which is currently on the festival circuit. She's a founding member of Women Independent Producers, a co-chair of the Producers Guild PGA East Screen Committee, and a climate reality leader. Welcome, Stephanie. And Emellie O'Brien is a pioneer of the sustainable filmmaking movement, working with major motion pictures and TV series to cut carbon and costs since 2011. After her sustainability leadership on The Amazing Spider-Man 2 contributed to it being acclaimed as the most eco-friendly blockbuster in Sony Pictures history, she founded Earth Angel in 2013 to expand her expertise and impact. An inaugural Tory Burch Foundation Fellow, Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses alum, and 2018 Inc. magazine 30 Under 30 Rising Star, Emellie also speaks around the world on the topic of sustainable production and sits on the board of Young Entertainment Activists and the Production Initiatives Association. That is a mouthful. I am in awe of both of y'all. My green heroes. So I have questions for each of you individually, and then I have questions for both of you. The individual ones are based on both of your experiences. So we'll start with Stephanie. Can you share how you got involved as a climate reality leader and how it intersects with your film production work?
Great question. So I'll start with the film part first. So I actually, as an undergrad, studied environmental science, and I thought I was going to be an environmental justice lawyer. But I graduated just before Y2K, and I ended up working for a technology company, and I did that for several years. But when I transitioned to film, one of the first projects I worked on was a commercial for Target, and they had a mandate that the set be green. And it was one of the first opportunities I had. We had eco consultants. They brought the materials in, they put up the signs, they made it really easy for the crew to input the proper materials in the proper containers. They had carters take the materials away. And it was just like mind-boggling. Like, I can do what I love and also do the thing that I studied and feel passionate about anyway. And so that was my kind of entree there. And then just after that, just more and more experiences in the industry, working with people who are really intentional about being sustainable, making the great content we want to make, but doing that in a sustainable manner. So that was my film trajectory. But then I also want to do that in my life, right? So I'm personally moving toward a zero waste lifestyle. It's not easy, but I'm working on it. And the climate reality training is the training that many people know as the inconvenient truth training that Al Gore created. It's actually available. I encourage people to check out I think it's climatereality.org website. They have training several times a year in different countries and different languages. It is a great grassroots level campaign to teach each and every individual what the climate crisis is, how to communicate that to their constituencies, be it organizations, educational spaces, groups. We are taught on how to do the presentation and then encouraged to teach it to friends, to have a dinner party. Like it's not like it's this thing that's so far away from us as being able to take control of the information, share it with people, and also share the good news, share what's happening. And we have there are different pockets of the organization. So I did a show in Long Island over the summer, so I could participate with a Long Island chapter, and just being able to take this kind of opportunities in your own hands. So hopefully that answers your question. But it was kind of like a gradual progression, and I'm just really thankful to have been exposed to those things and to know that I can do what I love and not hurt the earth while we're doing it.
Yeah. And you shared some really great advice because, I mean, this conversation is always timely, but the climate report that came out, I know everyone's like, it's hopeless. We can't do anything. And I'm like, that's what corporations want you to feel. They want you to give up on this fight, but like, it's a collective movement, and we all have our individual parts. I've been having like this stress conversation about like my boyfriend and I, like how we need to be greener in our household and all the things we need to do. And we're lucky, like Austin offers composting services. But it's like, there's so many things, and like, we can't give up this fight because it's like, how can we leave all these other generations with the mess that we created? So Emellie, can you share how your first role as a green steward, which I didn't know was a job title at production companies for Big Beach Films, led you into expanding what sustainability looks like on set, and then eventually launching your own company, Earth Angel, in 2013?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question, Megan. And thanks to Seed&Spark for hosting this conversation in the first place. It's really incredible, and I'm really delighted to be here, and especially alongside Stephanie. We go way back. So very excited to participate today. So yeah, my journey into sustainability was non-traditional, I would say. I graduated from NYU's film program. And my impetus to study film was really about, I wanted to help create socially and environmentally conscious content. Like, I knew this was a very powerful medium, and that if we leveraged it for good, we could create a lot of incredible social environmental change. So I did a lot of documentary work, and that was sort of the trajectory I thought I was going to go. And then I was the receptionist at Focus Features back when they had their headquarters in New York. And I was tasked with managing the Focus on Green initiative. So it was right when the studios started to create, they started to hire corporate sustainability folks, and they started to create their own internal sustainability programs. And so I started doing research. That was how I first discovered the Green Production Guide. And I went to this workshop in Gowanus, Brooklyn, that was about the rise of the environmental steward on set. And there were like 2 people who had done this job in New York City, like the first 2 people who'd ever done this. And they worked on these big Hollywood blockbusters. And they talked about how it was just like the worst job ever. They were like, it's miserable. You dig through trash all day, and you take away people's plastic water bottles, and they hate you. And, it's just like all of these hurdles. And I just remember sitting there listening to this thinking like, oh, there has to be a better way. Like, let me do this. I want to do this. I want to do this like seemingly very, impossible thing. And so I went back to my network at Focus and I said, who do you think would hire me to do this? Like, please, anyone. I really want to try this. And lo and behold, I got connected to Peter Seraph at Big Beach. And he is such a huge advocate of sustainable production. And he had this film that was shooting in New York City in the summer of 2011. And he was like, sure, let's roll the dice. Let's take a chance, see what you can do, And that was my first experience. And it was, like a lot of things in production, it was just a really organic word of mouth process from there. Like other producers called me and said, hey, I heard what you did on this set. Can you do it on my set? And, that's how it built towards, getting to Spider-Man and launching Earth Angel. But for me, it was really about like, wait a minute, we can't just have one person on one set doing this work. Like we need more than one Earth Angel. We need an army of angels. Like how do we create, a real sort of system of accountability and education and really integrating this in a much more kind of scalable way. So that's kind of how it all got started for me.
Yeah. And, even though you're adding crew members, I think I saw, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you actually, for the Spider-Man film, you saved like $400K from their budget. So it's like sustainability doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be like a nice to have. It can be, independent filmmakers can apply those same tactics. So back to Stephanie, we've talked about Green Production Guide. Can you explain what that is and also what role the Producers Guild East Green Committee has within the entertainment industry? Because I know PGA Green Committee had a part in developing that.
Yeah, so the Green Production Guide is a free resource that's available for anyone. You can go to greenproductionguide.com. It was created out of some wonderful, amazing folks, including Lydia Dean Pilcher, Mary Jo Winkler, Katie Carpenter, these wonderful folks who realized, as we're talking about, we could do this and we can be sustainable. We can do what we love to do and also do it in a sustainable way. So they created the Producers Guild Committee for the Green Committee, and we have mainly the East and West chapters. And then they also paired with what is called the SPA, the Sustainable Production Alliance, which is a series of studios and streamers who basically banded together, and together they came up with a kind of supposed to be easy to use, very repeatable. There's tons of resources on there. You almost get lost in the resources, but something that could be repeatable, templates, predetermined, really Excel spreadsheets that you can enter in information, infographics, so you can, if you're in an office, where can you save in terms of waste, and where can you maybe use some alternative means to achieve the same goal, but maybe having less reusable resources. Where like there are actually templates with memos for each department to be, so a producer, a production manager, line producer, department head can communicate to the department, okay, we are going to be implementing a green set or sustainable set. These are some of the things that we would like to do in our set. So a lot of those information, I really encourage you to check it out. I could go on for a while. There's also case studies of folks who've used the Green Production Guide. There's video resources. There's white papers. There's just a lot of resources, and I encourage people to just check that. Oh, no, there's also a new program, a series of videos that they're doing quarterly. The last one was actors talking about being sustainable. One of the first ones was working sustainability, working climate change into the script, and they had some individuals from different shows that are using our current reality into the storytelling, which is also, I think, a very important part, because the more that we create stories that don't believe climate change exists, the easier it is for people to ignore it, the easier it is for people to not act. So all of that to say, some wonderful individuals put it together. They got in line with some studios and streamers, and they are working continuously to get those big production companies and streamers to do more green and sustainable practices within the organization. And then as the Producers Guild is a professional organization. If you are a producer, line producer, associate producer, production coordinator, you can go to producersguild.org to find out if you want to become a member. And we have committees within that organization. And so the Green Committee, we promote the Green Production Guide. We promote also within learning and information sharing and resource sharing within the Producers Guild. And then we've also created an inter-guild committee where we are working with unions and guilds across the different disciplines. So like in New York, we have this quarterly meeting where we have representatives from Broadway, we have representatives from the various below the line guilds who are all building their own green committees, and we want to work together. We want to not reinvent the wheel. We want to share resources and share action so that we can, as an industry, really push for more sustainable practices.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's like the industry is already competitive in so many levels, but this aspect, it doesn't need to be competitive unless someone's trying to be like, I want to be the most sustainable. And it's like, yeah, set that example. So Emellie, can you walk us through the services Earth Angel provides and how productions can enlist your help?
Sure, absolutely. So when people ask us, how do we green a film set at Earth Angel? We talk about our model, our 4 S's model. That's all about the 4 S's for us. So we provide the strategy, the staff, the stuff, and the stats to help production shoot sustainably. So what we mean by that in terms of strategy is how do we take these principles of sustainability, such as zero waste, energy efficiency, resource conservation, et cetera, how do we translate that into actionable tools and methodologies for an individual production, right? Because we need to make sure that, at the end of the day, we're creating content, and so we need to make sure that we're meeting production budget restraints, timeline restraints, et cetera. So implementing those initiatives within the context of what that production is creating and where they're shooting and what's available there. So that's kind of what we mean by strategy. The staff element is kind of what we're most well known for. So at Earth Angel, we recruit, train, staff, and supervise eco PAs, our eco production assistants. So we have a pool of eco PAs that productions call on us for, and we staff them up in lots of different, production markets that we're working in. And they're really the boots on the ground people who are physically setting up our zero waste stations and, monitoring our plastic-free water systems and educating cast and crew on like how this is going to work and what we're going to be doing. So that's sort of the staff element. The stuff piece is all of our zero waste supplies, materials that we help the productions access. We help them with their supply chain and sourcing and procurement strategies. So how are we sourcing certified sustainable products and reuse secondhand items? So really helping dig in with each individual department about what that means for them. And then we also help repurpose all the assets once we've wrapped. So whatever isn't going, getting sent back to studio archives or getting put in dead storage, but they need to get rid of in a very fast way because they want to, not pay rent or get off this lease as quickly as possible. We help them repurpose those items into, the local community. And then last but not least is stats. So that's all the reporting and analytics that we provide. So everything from like waste diversion reports to carbon footprint assessments to cost benefit analyses. We put a huge emphasis on the stats and the metrics. So we're actually showing the progress of, our efforts over time.
That's awesome. And I imagine that's extra useful to break through like the people who are like the decision makers at corporations that need to prove to their board or whoever that this actually works and there's incentive to do it.
100%. What I always like to tell people is we're the only department that has an ROI. I have not yet met another production department that will actually give you an ROI. So yes, that's a big factor in pushing that, sustainable. Well, yes, you might be spending more on your labor to manage these initiatives. You will inevitably spend less on stuff and waste hauling and ideally less energy being used and et cetera. So there are ways that these expenses do balance out to be cost effective.
Awesome. This question is for either of you to answer. What are a few of the worst moves small independent films make in terms of the environment, and what are some alternatives you would offer?
You want to start with me? Okay. Well, I would say, I don't want to like necessarily call out particularly like independent films. I think like production in general kind of has some missteps that I think should definitely be paid attention to. But the number one contributor towards a production's carbon footprint, if we're talking sheer emissions, is always, 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 time and time again, it's fuel. So for productions to really think about, you know, when we're talking fuel, we're talking obviously your transportation footprint. So do we need as many vehicles as we need to, you know, transport our crew and our gear and whatever else we're moving around? Can we be hiring locally as much as possible to avoid having to fly people as much as we can? And then also, though, a big contributor towards our fuel is our generator use. So our on-site power needs are a big issue for not only for our industry, but, you know, the live events industry, lots of others as well. And so moving towards clean energy is something that is, you know, the primary focus for most industries right now. We need to stop burning fossil fuels, like yesterday, like 30 years ago, actually. And so, you know, there are really cool technology solutions out there now. There's e-generators, battery powered lithium ion battery generators. So you can get clean, silent power source on set. These generators don't necessarily have the capacity load that we would need for some of our like really big sets that are doing overnights, for example. But they do have units in 5Ks, 10Ks, and 20Ks now. Our go-to resource for that in New York City is a company called Shattered Prism. They're a partner of ours, and we work with them a lot. And you know, productions love them because you can just park these generators like right next to camera and they don't make any noise. Nice. So that's another big benefit to using them as well. So I would say, you know, where you can cut down on needing vehicles in the first place. And then when you do need vehicles, can you be getting hybrid or electric vehicles to replace those? And then when it comes to generators, ideally like reducing and eliminating generator use as much as you can, and then using these alternative clean energy generators whenever possible.
Nice. Stephanie, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, mine's more general. I think, particularly with independent film, there is a lack of belief that we could do this, that this is, you know, it's going to cost too much money, or we're not, it's just a lost cause. And more of my experience has been with independent film and with smaller projects, short films, digital content. So a lot of short shoots that only have like 20 or so people in them. And it takes that mindset, it takes that intention. Like, we are going to make this shoot as green as we can. And it also, I think, involving the crew, letting people know we want to make this a green set. I think there's a defeatist attitude sometimes. Like, if any one person complains, like, oh, well, the crew doesn't like it. And honestly, you'll always have one or two naysayers, but more often than not, your crew actually really wants to be green, and they are actually more excited, more motivated to be supporters of each other and encourage each other to follow the process, put the recycling in the right thing, make sure you compost, you know, reuse your cup in the before times, or use your, you know, reusable, your own reusable cup when you can. So yes. I think the biggest thing is just saying out loud, we want to make this a sustainable set, talking to your crew, encouraging them where in their department can they cut, cut some of the things that cannot be reused. I think to Emily's point about transportation, on a lot of the sets that I'm working on, we don't have the money for the cars. So a lot of times we're loading into a facility anyway, but once we're in that facility, does every light have to be on? You know, like, so basically just reiterating, you know, in some cases, finding ways to reward people who are, you know, doing these practices. Or competition is very much of a it's a great kind of motivator. So hey, the team that puts all of their stuff in the right container, they get a prize or something. Like, little things like that are great methods to incentivize your crew to participate. So I would say, in my experience, just the defeatist thought that because we're independent, because we're low budget, because we're small, because we're only a few days shoot, that we cannot do this. And I think that's something that can be turned on its head.
Yeah.
Can I jump on that really quickly, Megan? Because I think that's such a great point, Stephanie. And, you know, in a way, well, like at Earth Angel, we tend to work with larger, you know, studio productions, network television series, et cetera. But we have worked with our share of indies as well. And, you know, the one encouraging thing I want to say to independent filmmakers right out the gate is that, like, you're already more sustainable because you're more resourceful. You know, being sustainable means being more resourceful at the end of the day. So there's already an advantage there. But I also think, to Stephanie's point, this behavioral change element is really important. You know, we do tend to, because, you know, and I want to acknowledge the conditions that people work under in this industry, which are very extreme. You know, we're all working really long hours in all types of weather. You know, people haven't seen their family for weeks sometimes, you know, whatever it is, like it's hard work that we're doing. And so for Earth Angel, our approach specifically is like, we really don't want to make sustainability feel like a burden. We want to make it feel like an opportunity that, hey, you know, because people really respond when you are taking actions to have a more ethical set, you know, like if you are taking care of your people, if you're taking care of the planet, like, people want to be a part of projects like that, you know, like that is really the mentality. And so empowering folks to say, like, hey, I want to trial this. You know, we just worked with a show, and the set deck coordinator actually approached us and was like, we want to trial these reusable boxes to store all of our set deck items instead of going through all the cardboard. And we were like, yes, let's do it. You know what I mean? Like, so many times when you open up the door to have these conversations, people actually have really cool ideas. So many of the innovations around sustainability have been crew led. You know, a lot of the digital onboarding solutions we're seeing now, like moving to digital workflows, like almost all of those are crew led, because the people who know how to do this job the best and most efficiently are the people who do this job every day, right? So, you know, opening that dialogue so people can share their ideas, and we're really empowering them to take these actions. While yes, it can be challenging when you have really tight timelines, and you know, trying to get this project shot. Like, I still think that making time for that at the top of production meetings or whatever it is, just where can you integrate it so that it just comes really, really naturally. It's just part of the production process.
Yeah. Bringing up what Stephanie said about an independent filmmakers not thinking that they can do this, and or feeling disheartened. Say if someone arrived on a set and there isn't, you know, an environment, like an initiative, there isn't a plan in place that is already like being put forth by the producers or whoever is running the set that day. On an individual level, what can a crew member who wants to be more mindful of their carbon footprint on set, what can they do despite that not happening across the set?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think first and foremost, whatever department you are, familiarizing yourself with your department's best practices, which again, as we talked about in the Green Production Guide, there's a tool called the PEACH, which stands for Production Environmental Action Checklist. And it breaks down by department what each department can be doing to reduce their environmental impact. So if you're electric, there's a whole list just for electric. If you're catering, just for catering, et cetera. So there's a lot of things that you can do independent of how, you know, gung-ho the production necessarily is on sustainability. So I think that's one thing, to just like know what you can do independently, just in your day-to-day workflows, and how you can, you know, even simple things like, again, I keep harping on Set Deck. I don't know why. They're some of my favorite people to work with, I guess. But, you know, they created this whole system to just reuse all their bubble wrap, right? Like it didn't, that didn't cost anything. They just like set aside, like, this is the bubble wrap area. We're not going to buy any new bubble wrap over the course of this show. We're just going to keep reusing this stock, this supply. So, you know, different things like that I think are really important. But I also think it's important for people to speak up and say, like, hey, I'm concerned about our show's sustainability efforts. Can this be improved somehow? You know, I equate it to a lot of, you know, it's like it's the way you would speak out about a safety concern on set, or, you know, inclusivity concern or a harassment concern. Like, these are all, to me, on the same level of like having ethical, sustainable, mindful workplaces. So I think people should be empowered to raise that. And, you know, unfortunately, not everyone is going to respond to that in mindful ways, let's say, but still, like, the more even when people aren't ready to necessarily hear that, if they hear it over and over again, they're going to start to pay attention to it. Same with like suppliers. If you go to the same supplier and you're like, hey, I want material made from recycled content, they might not listen the first time, but if they hear it 20 other times, then maybe they're going to start to change their supply chain and get, you know, start to get that content. So I do think it's important for people to raise it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I can just piggyback on the speaking up aspect. I mean, it's funny that you asked this question because twofold. One is I've been on several sets where we did not have an environmental plan in place, and it's a matter of going to the production coordinator and saying, hey, so I noticed we have a lot of garbage cans. Could we have a recycle bin? You know, and you just say it like in a very kind of, no, could we possibly? And then they're like, oh, it's like $5? Sure. And then most buildings, I mean, most buildings in New York City are supposed to recycle. So I also get really friendly with the doorman or the security person. Like, hey, so where's the recycling situation here? Like, just getting to know your department. Absolutely. As Emellie said, but I also kind of like what, you know, in New York City, we also have green markets, these farmers markets that allow, they do composting collection. So even if you don't have collection at your home or wherever you're living, there are also these various places throughout the week where they have composting. So, I mean, it's going to sound ridiculous, but literally I was on a movie where he didn't have a green system. So I bought a composting bin and I brought it in to the office. And, you know, if I was in the break room and I saw someone throwing the coffee grounds, I'm like, actually, you know what? Those are compostable. And I put them in the compost and just created a behavior that they could mimic. So after that, people would take a think like, you know what? I could throw this away or I could put it in the compost bin. And then I just took it upon myself to figure out where the composting was near that office. And then I would just drop it off. And same thing, actually, when I was at a business nearby, it was in Union Square. There's a farmer's market 3 times a week in Union Square. So I would I had my little compost bin, I put a little sign up, and it was funny because a lot of people were like, at first no one contributing, and then more and more people contributing. And then by the end, it's like, who's taking the composting bin? And like, people would stop me and say, thank you so much. I would love to have something like this at this office. So, you know, I think, you know, speaking up, modeling the behavior, not admonishing anyone, just encouraging them. Hey, we can do things. You can empower yourselves. I'm willing to step in and do some of this work. Let's do it together. If you also have the same ethos, essentially. So I think from a bigger level, you can speak up, but also you can just continue to model the behavior for other people, and you'll see other people join in as well.
Yeah, that like very nicely answers our other question about kind of walking the line between shaming people and encouraging better choices. My therapist told me shame doesn't work because I was like, you know, with COVID, shame doesn't work on people. So there's got to be other ways, like through education and setting an example and kind of like leading them to the compost bin as an analogy. But what would you say is a common misconception when it comes to making sets greener?
I think there's a few misconceptions. I think one, that it's too hard and it's too expensive. Those are the biggest misconceptions, I would say. So, you know, we've obviously talked about ways that you can reduce the costs of, you know, associated with this. So that's one thing. But it's too hard, I think, is really about there isn't enough education on how it works, you know, and so that's what we really try to break down for people with our Eco-PA program, with some of these other elements. I think those are kind of the biggest things. But I also think there's a few other hurdles too that like misconceptions is one hurdle, but I think there's other categories of hurdle too. You know, one being like, we don't really have any sort of like regulatory compliance measures that are forcing our industry to do this. So I think that's something that is certainly a challenge. We don't have any fiscal incentives that are really incentivizing people to do this more. And then lastly, we don't have any consumer demand pushing this forward. So like other industries, you look at like fashion, for example, where like consumers want more sustainable fashion. clothing options and things like that. And so it's being very consumer driven. No one's going to choose to watch a film or television show because it was produced sustainably. Like, that's just like not how the production of our content really works, right? So we have to think about ways that we can create driving factors that aren't consumer driven, but, sort of more inter-industry. And I think examples of what Stephanie's talking about with getting like the unions and guilds involved and those different stakeholders, getting talent involved. And, there's so many different stakeholders in our industry. Every single one of them has a role to play in making this industry more sustainable. And so, educating audiences on like, this is the impact of what you're watching, I think is important too, because they are a stakeholder and they haven't really been engaged in that conversation as much either.
And I would just add another misconception is that if we just don't do it on this one, it'll be okay. Like, I don't, my shoot's small. This not that many people involved. We're not doing this. We're not like, I think every action helps. Everything that you can do will help us in this greater initiative to, try to be, get the climate in some kind of stasis. Because right now we're just, everything that we're doing is exacerbating it. And it's all the little things, like, again, printing, having your computer up, all of the paperwork we're having to switch. I know accounting systems have long needed the things to be in paper because down the line, legal needed to have the paper. And so even though I've done onboarding digitally, I go into the payroll office and they printed out everything I just digitally signed. So, it's there's still a lot of education that needs to happen. There's still a lot of just a lot of believing that this is the thing to do. And I think to your point about shaming, everything just depends on the community you're in. If you're in a community that's already kind of high level, I want to be sustainable, shaming will work with them because they've already decided that this is their value system. They want to adhere to it. But when you have individuals that are shifting or in between that space, you incentives work better, competitions work, information, definitely education, but convenience is one of the biggest things, like having the signage up, because you'll have people like, is this recyclable? Is this compostable? I don't know what it is. So having the information right where the people need to do the thing is helpful. Also, I watched this great video that Pixar said they got rid of you cannot have a trash can at your desk. I also want to reconfigure that word trash. Like for me, I'm trying to let's stop calling it trash. I'm done with this item. The single use is complete. Like what is another word we can use instead of trash? But anyway, just not having a trash can at your desk will slowly get you to not think everything can be easily thrown away. If you have to rise from where you are to take that item to be disposed of or for its next stage in its process, it will slowly start changing the way we think about what we use and how we use it and what to do when we're done with it. So I think some of the misconceptions and hurdles are really just that kind of area, and we all do it. I'm guilty of it. If I do something that I'm like, you know what, that could have been or whatever, I have no problem going in the trash and picking it back up and putting it where it needs to go. But it's been years of training myself that like it's not. There's just a lot of personal work that can be done, and then as you start to model that work, I see people who come back to me like, look, I got this. I have a reusable silverware set that I take with me everywhere. So if I go out to eat, I have that set with me. And other people are like, I bought the set too. Like you'll see that is going to encourage other behavior as well. So it's a journey. We're on it, but let's get on that train together, because the more we got folks who are not getting on the train, the harder it's going to be to get everybody going.
Yeah, that's really good advice, because I think there are a lot of people who are thinking about it but not doing it right now. And it's like, let's just start those habits early, because what is it, 30 days to make a habit? And so that like then the next person who's thinking about it and sees you doing it can be motivated to be like, oh, well, they were able to commit to it, and why can't I? Let's see. I have a little bit more a specific question, and Emellie, you brought this up when you were talking about Earth Angel services, but having water for hydration on set is essential. But plastic water bottles often go half used. This is one of my biggest pet peeves, and can create water coffins. Thank you, Julie, from our team, for that term. I've never heard that. When thrown away. Any tips specifically for water bottles or drinking water on set?
Yes, absolutely. You are not alone in that pet peeve at all. And it's funny too, because, I've been doing this work for 10 years, and the plastic water bottle thing I'm like, why is this still a thing?
Mm-hmm.
Just like, yeah. To me,
it feels very 80s or like 80s and 90s.
Yeah. It's one of the most low hanging fruit things you can do is to eliminate single-use plastics. But for whatever reason, people just, grip onto that as being like, no, you can't touch this. This is my thing, and then they psychologically think you're like, withholding from them somehow. It's wild. But here's what I've seen to be effective. If you want to eliminate single-use plastic water bottles, first and foremost, you need good dispensers, and they need to be hygienically maintained. So we tend to avoid the kind of Gatorade style dispensers because people can't see inside of them and they don't trust them. And I don't blame them either. So we try to use, clear containers. We talk about craft service cleaning these daily, obviously, and making sure they're all maintained. Now, in times of COVID, of course, we're using touchless dispensers. So that's been, a pivot that we've had to make. But they also do the trick just fine. And so, having a policy too on crew bringing reusable bottles is very important. Whether we have some shows that choose to outfit the crew with them, but I think most shows are kind of past that now, just because it's like everybody has 11 of these. Like, why are we continuing to buy them? But making systems really easy for crew to remember to bring those every day. So one thing, if you're not giving them bottles, maybe you give them carabiners so that they can hook those bottles to their equipment carts, to their bags, to their belts, to their like whatever it happens to be. Making sure like the names are on them and they're identified. We encourage people to have, if you're a department that works a lot, like you straddle between like being in base camp and being on set, like if you have to move around a lot, we tell you like have multiple bottles, like just have, here's your cart bottle, here's your working truck bottle, like whatever it is. And making sure those dispensers are, obviously really widely made available. So we typically have what we call a water logistics meeting and we have that meeting with the AD department, with the craft service department, and someone from production too. And we just really hammer home, like, this is how water's going to work. This is the who's doing what of it all, because like, you can't just leave it to chance, because as soon as there's a speed bump, people are like, oh, bring in the plastic water bottles, and that's so we always try to prevent that. And I think one of our biggest wins, I think, was when we were working on In the Heights here in New York, and it was like peak summer, tons of dancers, everyone's sweating and thirsty and dehydrated. But we were watering everyone without plastic water bottles. If like we had like compostable, biodegradable cups, if anyone forgot theirs, and all of those were on standby. And we were shooting a scene in the subway, and the location manager said, oh, well, why don't we just like forgo the water system for today? Like, it's going to be too hard to do this on the subways. Like, let's just bring in the plastic water bottles. And without us having to say a word, the first AD turned to him and said, why would we do that? It's been working so well. Like, we didn't even have to intervene. Wow. And I was just like, oh, wow, this is beautiful. This is a beautiful moment. So, it does speak to if the program is really well executed and people start to form those habits, it's possible, even in peak summer, big musical scenes. Like, it's definitely possible.
And awesome. If I could just piggyback on that, also putting on the call sheet, bring your water bottle. Everybody sees the call sheet. So reminders are helpful. In those spaces that are maybe not set, like maybe for the table read or for other things where we just or even panels. Like lately, I've just been like, why does the panelist have a water bottle? Like, we just bring in pictures. Every meeting that we have, PGA, other committees that I'm on, we say, bring your water bottle, and we supply pictures. So, whether onset or offset, the more that we engender the behavior, I think the more people will adapt to it. And, especially it's easier also living in New York City. I think we carry our water bottles pretty regularly. But in addition to what Emily's saying, if people already have the cold water bottle, some sets I've seen have also provided the hot water container for the individuals in set. So a similar kind of thought process, because coffee cups are another thing, and those K cups, like everybody thought the K cups were a good thing, and I'm just like, now we're seeing that they can be recycled and reused and things of that nature. But like, reduce is the first element of reduce, reuse, recycle. If we can reduce the use in the first place, then we don't have to do the other elements down the line. So Emellie brought up some great ones. I just wanted to add that, like, announcements, call sheets, every location scout, every kind of communication that goes out to the crew, add to there, please bring your water bottle, water will be supplied. And that also helps people remember. Oh, and one last thing is the water coffins. Another thing that we also try to do is, like, if there, God forbid, our water, unused water bottles, we have a jug that we'll just put the water in and give it to the wardrobe department to use for the steamer. So we try not to because a lot of times the water doesn't get used in those bottles because they get left and then nobody wants to pick it up because they're not sure it's there anymore. So those kinds of things are also little things you can employ.
That's so smart. I can't tell you how many water bottles I've found on set where it's like a sip was taken, it was abandoned, and there's no name on it and no one claims it. And I'm like, God damn it. Like, what is happening here? We're going to go to some audience questions. So Bree will pull this up on screen. Christine Marsh says, I'm a professor at Bowie State teaching media production and adding virtual production to the curriculum. The VP workflow saves a lot of resources, but any suggestions to add more sustainable solutions?
And I'm assuming this is in the context of shooting virtual production specifically, or just like in general?
Yeah, virtual production specifically. Any sustainable solutions there? Interesting.
Well, I mean, I think obviously virtual production is definitely a big sustainability win right out of the gate. You're not shooting on location, so you definitely don't have generators. You definitely don't have tons of people making waste in the same way that you would. So I think that's a big win. I think when it comes to virtual production or even post-production too, I think a big thing to look at though is how much energy are you using? And is the facility that you're working out of, is it using a renewable energy provider? Because sometimes that's a really good question to ask. A lot of times buildings, are, have whatever arrangement with whatever big utility provider that they have. And there are options that you can switch to the renewable energy provider. And it's very easy to do. And it usually doesn't cost anything extra. You're just opting in for the renewable source. So always kind of checking in with, I know it's difficult sometimes when you're a tenant of a building, right? Like you're like, do I have say or control over this if you're not the one paying the electricity bill? But that's always something I recommend. I also recommend like any sort of energy saving elements that you can integrate, like the power strips, for example, that help prevent what we call vampire voltage, where it's just like, energy that's just being drawn from technology that's not even being used, for example. So, wherever you can have the most efficient, equipment is also something I would say is a big factor for anything kind of virtual or post-production related.
And Christine also added looking for suggestions to offset carbon footprint with virtual productions.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it also kind of depends on the virtual production. Some of the ones that I've worked on, we've had to ship the materials to whoever we're filming with. So, if you can implement any kind of LED solution, which is almost so commonplace now, we don't worry too much about it. But, LED solutions, trying to use iPads or smaller devices where necessary. If your shipping solution can be a less of a carbon footprint. I know there's new technologies in terms of reusable boxes and paper tape as opposed to plastic tapes, like any kind of little thing that you can do. But the biggest thing, as with anything, which it applies to virtual, but also just anything that I think we haven't really harped on, is it's about intention and planning. So you have to decide you want to do this, and then you plan ahead of time what you're going to do. It doesn't have to be 2 months ahead of time. It can be before, one of the first days, or maybe at the production meeting, we're going to talk about how we're going to implement sustainable practices, so that before you start buying things and sending people out to go to the, pick up Crafty in taking back the plastic bags. Look, let's think about how we can do this. Like, what are some ways we can maybe go to more green and sustainable vendors, so that the items can be shipped to us in a low emission way, and then we're not having a PA drive to the store. Or what are some ways that we can just rethink how we've been doing things in a more sustainable way. So hopefully that answered your question. But it's as Emellie said, you're already doing a big element, because you're not transporting a lot of people and not having that element. But shipping, the battery and energy use of the materials you're using, all those things also can cut the emissions in other places.
We'll do one last question from Jim Brotcher. Have we discussed helping actors move from paper scripts to screens? I've tried to provide screen-friendly solutions for actors, but they are used to paper.
I think that's I'm finding it's a generational thing, because some actors nowadays, when I email them their sides, they're on their phone with the sides, and there's not even a question of me giving them a script. So it's about that gentle encouragement, providing an iPad or some large device that is portable, that will keep their place. I haven't used scriptation, but I've heard scriptation is also very easy. So you can highlight your role, you can make notes, and those notes can transfer when you get new versions of the script. So providing the tools and the applications that will make it easier for them to make the switch, I think, is key there. But I'm finding, it's just like big size versus little size. There was a time when we always had to have some big size, because generationally, there are folks who were used to having the bigger sides. And now, particularly folks who are used to being on social media, used to being on their devices, they prefer that I not even give them the script. So those are some suggestions. Hopefully that'll help you out.
Yeah, I definitely echo scriptation. It's a fabulous app if you haven't tried it. I think one of the biggest benefits to it too is that if you're taking notes on your script and you get revised pages, it'll keep your same notes on those revised pages, which I know is a big impediment to people like moving to digital workflow for script stuff. But yeah, I think it does take time for people to acclimate to a digital workflow who aren't necessarily comfortable with that, but making it as easy as possible for them to make that transition, incentivizing them to make that transition. Again, like the prizes thing, it sounds silly, but it goes a long way. Like, people love to win things, so It's like, oh, use your iPad for your sides all week, get the Green Crew Member of the Week award, whatever it is. Like, that's, we do a lot of those types of like behavioral nudge incentive programs that are really effective.
And also, to add to scriptation, you can use it for even your production documents, your production schedules, like all those kinds of things. So scriptation is in the name, the script is in the name, but to Emily's point, you can also use it for other elements across your production. So that also can, clamp down on paper, and people can make notes on it and have it easily accessible. So another kind of plug for that.
Awesome. Well, this has been so helpful. I mean, mine's been opened and things that I haven't considered, and now am guilting myself internally. I'm like, I'm not returning to set until I have an environmental plan in place. It's been a while since I've returned to set, but I appreciate all the knowledge y'all have dropped on us. Any last things to plug, or any last advice to depart our audience with?
Well, I would just, again, thank you for hosting this. Thank you, everyone who attended. Hopefully you can share with your friends and colleagues what you learned today. I would just encourage folks to go to greenproductionguide.com and check out the document that Emellie mentioned, the Peach. It literally is an Excel document that lists out by department things you can do. So if you're trying to figure out, I don't know, I want to make my set more green, but I don't know how to do it in transportation. I don't know how to do it with props. Just read it like a suggested set of suggestions, essentially, to implement for your set. It's really easy to use. It may seem intimidating because there's so much stuff going on, and just try to one set on the next set, try to do one thing differently, and then invite other people to try to do more things differently. Especially if you're on those small sets, those commercial or branded content sets where there's like 5 people. Any one person out of that 5 people doing something, that's 20% improvement. So I encourage you to check out Green Production Guide and just give yourself that challenge of making a change, you know?
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just add, agree with everything Stephanie said. You know, we're a creative industry. You know, we make it snow in the summer. We make people fly through the air. We make all kinds of things happen every single day. We can do this. Like, we can do this sustainably if we set our minds to it. If we come together and we tackle this challenge, the way that we completely transform the way we work during COVID, you know, like, it goes to show you that if there's a big enough threat and a big enough crisis, we can radically change the way we work. And so I'm hoping that is a lesson out of like these very trying times that we've all been through, and that we respond to the climate crisis, you know, with the same kind of urgency that we have been responding to the pandemic. So that's my last 2 cents. And again, really appreciate Seed&Spark hosting this conversation, and for all of you for joining and listening in today. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you both, our wonderful panelists, Stephanie and Emellie. We shared their info in the Slack, and we'll also, in the chat, and we'll also follow up to our attendees with more information on where to follow them and all the resources we talked about today. Thank you for the crucial work that you're doing. Thank you to WeTransfer for supporting this event, our partners in the Cut Film Shop, LMU, and the Gotham. And thank you to our wonderful audience for watching and engaging at home, and Bree on Tech and Danny in the chat. This event was part of our Ethical Set series, and you can catch the next one in September 29th, about sensitivity readers and cultural consultants. And we're teaching our entire crowdfunding and filmmaking curriculum weekly from July through September as well, which is free for all to attend virtually, including this Friday distribution download for shorts and web series. And you can check all that out at seedandspark.com/events. And I hope everyone applies this amazing advice shared today to make their productions more environmentally sustainable. We all have a part in this. We don't have to be hopeless. I think we owe it to Mother Earth after we make her look so bad in all of these disaster movies. It's like, let's do our part and make a better lasting effect than just leaving behind a very high carbon footprint. So thank you all, and have a great rest of your week, everyone. Thanks, everyone.